the needing to not be as active increases. So if you've ever noticed that it seems like sometimes there's differences in Monday, Wednesday, Friday versus Tuesday, Thursday, this might be going on. They also looked at, we have 3 groups of students who start at the same place. They have the same knowledge starting point. And the low literacy group is given more time to interact with the information and given less information to interact with. Meaning the highest density is giving the most information and the least amount of time. So what we're seeing is that the group that is given more time and less information achieved more than the group that was given shorter time and more information, even though they all start at the same point. So if we're going to make a decision about, do I cover more material or do I go deeper? Possibly we want to think about going deeper. Okay. So to make use of this information, when you first enter a teaching period, get to the new information first. Really focus in on that flood of information because that's when the students are going to be most active in the processing of that information. Be careful about too many questions at first. I'm not saying don't ask questions, but if we start asking too many questions, we might get off track. Okay? So be focused. Don't use the first prime time for procedural type of activities. Okay. Well, how was your weekend? Oh, well, that's nice, but it's cutting into that precious few minutes that we have. Okay? So downtime, when students are not as actively processing new information, that's time for them to practice. Give them some kind of activity to discuss the material. Maybe do group work, do some investigation, so they can begin working with the information and still keeping it active in their working memories, which will help them eventually get into long-term memory. Okay. That second prime time, use that as a time to help students make connections, connect the dots, kind of bring it back together, kind of summarize, recapture what you've been doing in this class period. And structure your lessons to make use of that cycle. Okay. Now that will lead us into practice. Okay. And how much do we have to practice? Does practice really make a difference in learning? And what we have seen is over the long term, repeated practice can cause us to assign extra neurons to ideas. This is not liking me today. Okay. And eventually that idea will become more or less permanent. So the more you practice it, the better the chance is that the idea will become permanent. Which is great if you learn the information correctly the first time, which is problematic if you don't learn it correctly the first time. Okay. And yes, you can relearn information, but it's much harder the second time around. It's much easier and more efficient to learn it correctly the first time. Okay. So practice is a good thing. We have to practice these new ideas, these new concepts we're working with. So if you were to give me a concerto to learn, and I never practice it, it would be detrimental, and you would not be pleased with me at all. Okay? You would pull me in the office, and I'd get a lecture about it. Right? And my violin teacher had to do that more than once. Right? Okay? So practice is very important. Okay? But practice does not make perfect. Because I can practice something, and I can practice it incorrectly. And I can keep practicing it incorrectly. And eventually, I learn it incorrectly. Okay. So practice makes permanent. Practice does not make perfect. So therefore, give them practice, but make it relevant. Weed out anything extra, give them the most relevant information to practice with. Okay. Make it in short, intense periods. okay, to really have to engage the material. Okay? Practice more at first, then as they gain more experience, practice less, but let them go deeper with it. So practice at first is more intense, more focused. Over time, less practice, but deeper. Okay? It also can help sometimes if you take the practice problems with word examples. Okay? Because when Duke is going through material and students can see what he has done, they begin to mimic his thought processes and the way he's done it, and that helps them in their practice. So it gives the students cues on how to practice effectively. Provide explanations of those steps, why you do those things. So sometimes as you're working through a problem, you might go through your thought process out loud with the student, say, as I'm doing this, I've done this, and then it led me to do this. So they have structure to know how to proceed with their practice. Okay? Ask students to generate explanations in a worked out example. So once again, we can begin to see, are they having problems? What are the problems? What's going on? And then give prompt and specific feedback, okay, on why it's correct or why it's problematic. So if I'm in Julie's class and I get my assignment back and there's a big old happy face on there and she writes, "Great job, Jim. Maybe even you're wonderful." I will walk away from Julie's class thinking, wow, this is fantastic. I feel so wonderful about myself. But I have no clue what I just turned in and what I got a grade on. What I need from Julie, even if it's a little uncomfortable, is I need her to say, okay, Jim, you did this incorrectly. Here's how you should have done, how you could fix it, how you could learn from this experience. Or if I really did do a good job, I need to know, well, why did I do a good job? Was it because I had good grammar and my sentences were just beautiful? Or what was it that was good about it? That gives me the information to know how to proceed as I'm continuing my practice and my learning. And if I don't get it, if I just give the generic stuff, it's only temporary. It doesn't last. It's only the feedback that's specific and tied to the learning event that really makes a difference in students' learning. Okay. So, we get into rote memory or rote learning, just memorization. What about it? Okay. Rote learning, memorizing things, does not help with understanding. Okay. It's okay, but it's not the best method to help students transfer ideas into long-term memory and to use those ideas in the future. It can work, but what happens is if I learn something and I just memorize it, I have to use the exact same cues to retrieve that information, exactly as I store it. So if you ever had an experience where students are in an activity and you go through the examples and they seem to get it, and then next week the situation is slightly different, but they're using the same skills and they act like they've never seen the idea before. Okay. Or I had an experience where the science teacher came down to me and said, "Hey Jim, why aren't you teaching these ideas in math?" I'm like, "You're crazy, I'm doing it." Well, they weren't transferring over because they were just memorizing. Or they come to the end of class, take a test, the next day they're like, "Can't tell you what's on the test." Okay, so memorization is okay, but it's not highly effective. Okay? And if students have to learn too many ideas too quickly, it will hinder this process as well, because by default, if students have too information and they feel a little overwhelmed with it, they'll go to memorization, which is okay, but it's the least efficient way to really learn and understand. Okay? So here's an expression that's good to remember. Too much, too fast, won't last. So if I overwhelm students with too much information, they don't have time to process it, break it down, and interact with it, it goes in, is limited and may not even last long term. Okay? So when it comes to learning, we want things to make sense and we want them to have meaning and purpose. Okay? So our decision on do we keep this information that's coming in, do we do something with it? Okay? Because if I were to ask you what you saw on your drive in, most of you couldn't tell me because you made a decision it was not important enough to do anything with. Now our brain's decision on to keep it or reject it is based on sense and meaning. Sense refers to, does this fit into my view of how the world works? Does it make sense with what I already know? The meaning part is, well, so what? Why do I really need to know this? So if I just throw ideas out there and I don't help students connect with why is this important, how will it help them, how will it be a benefit, how it makes sense with what they already know, they're less likely to grab on to new ideas and more likely to eliminate them from their working memories. Okay? So it's much more likely to be remembered if it has sense and meaning. And sometimes we have to help students see the sense and the meaning behind the information. And when I first started teaching, I just assumed that since I was teaching math, everyone loved math, and they would just automatically connect with everything I was teaching them.
Amen.
Then I came to my senses, and reality began to sink in that didn't happen. But what I learned is if I could help students make sense and meaning of it, they were much more likely to connect. Okay? So when we're working with students, connect what we're doing to their interests or everyday activities. Okay? Help students understand the importance of what they're doing, not only for that right here and now, but where's all this leading? How will I use this in the future? Look at which task we actually ask students to do. Okay? Sometimes we can give them activities that might be nice activities, but may actually not help them. Provide everything with the world context. Okay? So when it comes time to rehearsal of information practice, okay? If we find first we get it, if we find no sense or purpose, we begin to eliminate it. Secondary is if we have time to make sense of it, begin to break it down into its bits and pieces, we'll do more with it. Okay? And rote rehearsal, rote memory is limited in its usefulness. When we have time to elaborate, that's when we begin to do and use more of that information. Okay? And if students don't have experience or training on how to do that, often they go back to rote processing for nearly all information. Okay? And as we become more specialized in our disciplines, there are unique ways of thinking in each of our disciplines. And if students aren't being trained on how to think within the realm of our discipline, they tend to go back to rote memorization. Now, Bloom and his team in the early 50s came up with a taxonomy of how much processing do you have to do within a learning activity. And in the early 2000s, they revised it. Now, if you go to teachers' camp, they're going to tell you what all those things mean and go into great detail and provide wonderful examples. So today, we're going to talk about complexity and difficulty. So you need to go to teachers' camp so you can get the rest of the story. How was that, Allison?
That's fantastic.
All right. Okay. Now, often people will use complexity and difficulty as the same idea, but they're really different processes. Okay? So we want to know the difference so we can use it effectively. Okay? So how do we get students to think at higher levels? What if students are having trouble moving to a higher level of thinking? What do we begin to do? So complexity and difficulty are going to give us the keys to those answers. Okay? So complexity deals with the way I process or deal with information. We'll try this side to see if it's less temperamental. Okay? So when it requires more mental processing for me, it is more complex. Okay? And more complexity helps me achieve at higher levels. Okay? So here's an example. Okay? So let's say I ask a student, what is the capital of Missouri? Now that is a very simple recall type of activity where I just want basic knowledge from a student. Okay? And so it's at the very lowest level. Just remember on the previous taxonomy, if you're familiar with it, it was knowledge. Now, if I ask you to describe in your own words what is meant by the phrase state capital, it requires more processing on the part of the student to deal with that information rather than just tell me the name of the capital. Therefore, students are thinking at a higher level and they can do more with the information and begin to hopefully one day apply it. So it's more complex. Difficulty, on the other hand, deals with how much effort do I have to give. Not how much processing do I have to do, how much effort do I have to put forth. Okay? So it's possible for activities to become more difficult with never becoming more complex. Okay? Now, if I ask students to tell me the names of the states, very low level, still remember. And if I ask them to tell me the states and their capitals, I'm still doing with basic recall. I'm not asking them to go any deeper. I'm just asking them to do more. It takes more effort to tell them the states and their capitals, but it doesn't require me to think any deeper. If I then include the date that they were admitted to the union, I'm not asking them to go any deeper. I'm just asking them to expend more effort. So I've increased difficulty, but I've never increased complexity. Okay, so they're not the same process. Okay, so if students are having trouble going deeper into material, give them more practice at the lower levels. Increase the difficulty. Ask them to expend more effort before you ask them to go deeper. Okay. When students need to go deeper, you have to look at what am I asking? Am I asking basic recall types of information, or am I asking them to create a new product? Those are very different if you're going from one extreme to another. Okay? And you probably will want to consider having both ready. What about ability? Okay. It is possible for a student to expend a great deal of effort with really little achievement. Okay? And so what teachers begin to do sometimes is we'll increase that whole difficulty and never get to the complexity. So we keep students really busy. And some students will even say, well, you're giving me a lot of busy work. And maybe we are. So difficulty is not going to help us get students deeper into thinking. The complexity will do that. Okay? So with ability, difficulty will come into play. And what we have to be careful is we tend to allot time for our average or typical student. Now, the really fast learners are at an advantage because they're so quick, they have more time to work with the idea, to break it down, and to facilitate the story of it. The slow learners, they're the ones that struggle. They usually don't have enough time or interaction with the idea to really make a difference. Okay. But what we have seen, that slow learners, if you can take the material and weed out anything that is extra, focus on what is really important and structure it, and help students see the structure, they will perform just as well, if not better, than the other students in the course. But the slow learners, if they are given enough time and enough support to process the information, they will do just as well. But if we're not careful, we'll tend to go for the average student, and sometimes we'll ignore a whole group of students. Okay? So, when it comes to instruction, provide things that are really focused, very intentional. Okay? Allow students enough time. Okay? And so an idea they encountered in the first week, repeat it up in week 2, week 3. Keep going back to those ideas. Advanced organized concept math, make diagrams, hierarchy charts, help students see how things are connected, how ideas are actually working. And that will be useful when you're trying to connect new information to what you already know, if you can see those structures. Okay. If you don't give students enough challenge, they will not rise to the occasion. They have to be challenged to act on the information. But if you give them impossible tasks, they won't even try. Okay. Now, my good colleague, Dr. Hedgepath, knows more about these next 2 individuals than I do. Okay? And it's not easy for me to say that someone else knows more than me. But what Marzano and the next slide will be Hattie, what they did was look at all the studies that have been done on learning, the efforts that we use in education for people to be taught in the learning activities. And so they did a meta-analysis, and they came up with an effect size. And the effect size is looking in terms of standard deviation units. If I use this strategy, how much of a difference in standard deviation units will I see in student achievement? Okay. This first one, Marzano came up with 9. These are the top 9 things that we do. We'll see the impact in student achievement. Okay. So the first one, if we help students identify similarities and differences, they will typically improve on their achievement over 1.5 standard deviation units above their counterparts. So just helping students see similarities and differences, if that's all we did, we would see a big improvement in student achievement. Summarizing and note-taking. Note-taking is excellent activity, but students have to see that note-taking is a work in progress. Never take notes verbatim. And that they have to go back to the notes and add to the notes as they learn new information. The effort and recognition, okay? Homework and practice we've talked about. Non-linguistic representations. Presenting the information in a graph, a picture, a song, another way will really help students. Working in groups. Setting goals, helping students even set their own goals for their own learning and taking ownership of that. And then providing feedback. And the feedback has to be tied to what's being learned. Doing research. And then cues, questions, and events organizers. Okay, and you can see a list there. And this is about 150, is that right, ma'am? 150 or so? Okay. So if you look at his work, you'll see approximately 150 strategies and how much of an impact they would have if you began to use them. Okay. So I'll just reference them this time so you can look at those more later. Okay. So as we are concluding, think about learning being a process rather than a product that we check at the end. And I'm still learning, you're still learning. And think of learning in those terms for our students. Okay? Our instruction has to be deliberate, and we have to arrange it to facilitate the learning. So maybe we'll be like Amanda and say, wow, once I focus on student learning, the transformation was just dramatic. I can see a great difference in my students. Okay? So we have to plan carefully, and teachers camp will help with that process. Got to hit again, all right? And we should always consider the learning, because we do want to improve learning for our students. That's why we're here. That's why they come to us, is for us to help them in the learning process. Okay. I trust you probably don't have any questions, but I threw that in just in case.
Just go back to the Marzano slide.
Sure.
I didn't quite get all those.
And if you
I
would,
got that from
and I'll be happy to send a copy of that to you if you would like.
That'd be great. Yeah, just send it to them.
And if I forget, just drop me an email, okay?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, see, right, so if, you know, you can see within, like, we have a 20-minute sermon versus 30-minute sermon. Okay? That what will happen is toward that middle, they will need a little time to help them kind of apply and reflect and think about it. So kind of more in the middle sermon. Maybe something to do a case study or, you know, talk about, okay, what did this mean for the person? How did I actually use this? You know, and don't present it with your main points. Yes, sir. Yes.
It doesn't seem to be like that. It's like our expectation for how long the lectures should go determines how long we check out. That was happening. What's the explanation for why that changed overall?
It deals more with how much information we can process, and we can go with like 10 to 12 pieces of information. So once we start getting too much, we have to have time to kind of let it simmer, if you will. We have to have just, just can't handle continual new information.
I guess that's fine. It seems like that would always happen about the same when you sign in. It seems like no matter how long the lecture was,
Yeah, and those are rough. I mean, it's not perfect, but you're going to see that general trend. Now, what can happen is if you have a really long lecture period, and say it's 80 minutes, and if you treat it like 240 minutes, and at that point you say, okay, stand up, stretch your legs or something, or hey, we've been talking about this, now we're talking about this. What if we have done in effect, we've created 2 learning cycles, so you'll have 2 smaller downtimes as opposed to 1 big one. So sometimes if you're dealing with a large block of time, what you can do is give them some kind of cue that you've done this, now you're moving on to this. And so that's kind of where it comes into play. And as we get older, it's less of a factor. We can get ourselves to kind of have less need for a downtime, but it's still always there to some degree. Yes. On the self-reported grade student expectations, have students contract with how they want to do and what they want to learn. Have them keep a journal of this is what I'm expecting to learn. You can do ask students what they already know, what they want to learn, and then at the end ask them what they have learned. So ask them what they predict their grade to be, where they think they're going to head, and then help them see is what they're actually doing, matching what they say they anticipate.
all right, thank you. Here's my little thought about the teacher's camp. In looking at the lecture time for the class session, what we learned on Monday was numerous techniques of how to take that time period, introduce a concept, and then work with it in just split, very, very short segments of time to immediately begin using that material, comparing it, contrasting it, analyzing it, evaluating it, back into another example of new information, stop, work with that a little bit, and so you're breaking up this lecture into numerous ways of utilizing the information. And honestly, I just felt honored to be a part of such a presentation as we had all day on Monday. and I came out energized. And I was able to think about my teaching career and how I have been taught and how I have taught in piano, but then in the other classes that I have taught, and to be able to see good things that I've done and things that maybe weren't so successful. And then, you know, it begins to apply to every area of your life. And you're like, wow, I'm learning. Ah! And a word about our assessment academy. As we all started this, we six who committed to it, you know, we've gone through so many different stages through this a little bit longer than a year at this point. It's been fascinating. It's been frightening. It's been, when do we come out to you all and begin to let you know what we're really involved in? And so we decided to be rather quite low-key, rather subversive. And so you're beginning to see the glimpses of this. And, you know, what is the name of our accrediting agency? The Higher Learning Commission. Guess what they are now about? Learning. Duh. What have they always been about? Assessment. Well, things are changing in a dramatic way. And so as part of our next comprehensive visit, 15-16, the focus will be on the learning of our students. And so that's, I'm telling you too much, but that's what we're getting into more and more. And you'll be able to see more and more. You may remember me talking last workshop a year ago about you will be hearing more and more about student learning. And that was a sort of a subliminal message. And so you probably can't see the subliminal message that's passing by every now and then, the importance of student learning. But more and more you'll be hearing that. I pass it along to Ed now, who's going to talk to us about the library.
As you can see, am I on? Can you hear me out there? No, it's not very loud. Can you turn this off? Test one, test two, is that better? Can you hear me? At the back. How's that? All right, we're going to look at about 5 different things in about 10 minutes. So I'm going to be cruising right along. Excuse me. I want to talk about resources updates that we're have going on in the library right now. Last year, at the beginning of the year, right after the semester started, we added eBrary for our collection, and so we didn't get a big opportunity to talk to you about it. There's about 70,000 ebooks in the collection last year. This year, that collection has about 78,000 ebooks in it. It has a very good ability to connect to any little portable device you have, except the Kindle. Kindle still does not work well with other people, so if you're trying to get things on your Kindle, you're always going to have problems. We just want to kind of give you some trends of where we're going. Our print holdings right now is about 196,000 items, and we have about 98,000 ebooks. So as you can see, we have about 33% of our collection in e-content. As time progresses, that number is going to come to a balance, and then at some point we will tip the balance over into more electronic and less print. Last year, we also added JSTOR Arts and Sciences 1 collection, which is an archive collection, which means some of the print journals that we have on our shelves are going to disappear because we have them in electronic archives rather than print archives. We will be adding in the future additional JSTOR collections, so more archival electronic content and less print archival content. Right now, what you can see is 99.997% of our journal holdings are in electronic format. That means we have very little in print, and that will be the ongoing trend. This year, we're going to upgrade our education full text and education source as soon as EBSCO comes out with it. Education full text is a subset of their education source, which will add about 4 times as much content, journal content for the education resources. We're also, Dr. Bailey has been begging us ever since he walked in the door for communication abstracts, and we will be adding that to our collection. ProQuest dissertation and thesis database is for the EDD program. HLC said this is something you should have, so we listened. We will be adding the International Index to Performing Arts, which the theater department has been asking us for, I don't know how long. Ever since you walked in the door? Close, okay. So those are the new things that we will be bringing online. And basically what you'll find, and I'll talk about our overall materials budget in a moment. The EDD program and the MSN program brought in new monies. Everything else that we are doing this year is reallocating funds. So it's things that we're not using anymore. We drop those, we pick up new stuff. So there's not a lot of new money. Faculty survey. You gave us a lot of good feedback. Overall, what you said is the quantitative data was, hey, you're doing your job, you're doing it well, we like what you're doing. Qualitative data, you gave us some interesting comments. And throughout the year, the newsletter that we put out, we will be discussing some of the content that was in the survey. And then in the spring workshop, I want to have a session in the workshop so that I can present more information, but have a dialogue. What did you mean when you said this? So that we understand a little bit better. The next few things I want to talk about are just some of the big issues that I thought came out of the survey that I'd like to talk with you about. One of the big issues was increased access to digital content. That was a big issue that almost everybody who responded to the survey said. So I just want to kind of give you an idea of where we are and where we're going. Last year, we spent 65% of our materials budget on electronic content. This year, we're approaching 70%. And that, to me, is an indication that's the direction we're going. So you're asking us to provide more and more digital content, and that has been the direction we've been going for the last 5 years. And so we're moving that direction. It's expensive. Folks, it's expensive to buy content. Let me give you a really good illustration. You want to go out and buy an ebook. You're going to spend $10 for an ebook on Kindle. I cannot buy that book on Kindle for you. I cannot give it to you because Kindle's product prevents it. If I buy any kind of electronic content, I'm going to pay 3 or 4 or 5 times the cost that you pay for it. So if I go out and buy a $9.99 book, I'm going to expect to pay $50 for it. Because the publishers are saying, oh, if I sell it to an end user, they're the only one using it. If I sell it to the library, I don't know how many people use it. So I want more money from you. So it's not as cheap for me to go out and buy it as you to go out and buy it. The other thing you said on the survey was stop focusing on your facilities. Students want digital content. We completely agree with you. Students want digital content. But what the students tell us is that they want us to focus on our facilities because they want a good place to come and study. They want to collaborate. They want spaces where they can individually study, get away from all of their friends in their dorm, and get to a quiet place. So while you're saying that they want the digital content, and we agree with you, they want the digital content, they're also telling us, focus on the facilities. We want good facilities to use. The liaison program, overwhelmingly, you told us, hey, it's great. We like the individual attention we're getting, and the librarians are connecting with us. So I'm very glad to hear that. So what are the next steps in the liaison program? Well, one of the things we have not done since I've been here is done a major reading of the collection. Matter of fact, I think prior to my coming here, which has now been 11 years, it was several years, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, before, since we took anything out of the collection. So as you saw, we have 196,000 books in our collection. Our collection, based on the content that we have, probably should be about 120,000 books. So that's how old and dated our collection is and unuseful. And so this year, we're going to be going through a process of removing that non-useful stuff, which means our liaisons are going to be coming back to you and saying, hey, this is the stuff we've identified that we think is not useful. Do you agree with us? If you do, we're taking it out. You will have the opportunity to say, no, this is similar work, I think it still needs to be done. We'll put that back in. Marketing. One of the concepts that we really understood in all of our surveys is we're providing things for you, we're providing resources and services, and then we're getting comments back that says something like, I wish you would do this, I wish you would provide that. And it's things that we already do. And so it made us realize we're just not doing a good enough job with marketing. You don't know everything that we're doing, so what we need to do is develop new marketing ideas. And so we put together a team this year of liaisons and staff people who are developing new ideas on how to market, and then we're going to be implementing those strategies this year so we can get information out to you. Digital publishing. We've talked about digital publishing within the library for several years, but when Josh came on board, it actually became a reality. Where is Josh? Josh? Josh is our electronic services librarian, and he is a sharp cookie. Very smart. And so his idea of bringing on, doing digital publishing, we've talked about it. He has the capability of doing it. And so now we have that option. But in the survey, when we asked you about it, you said, it's a great idea, you're ecstatic about it, but you're also overwhelmed. And so trying to get you involved in the process is going to be difficult, and you understand that. However, the honors program, Allison, is going to work with us to bring the capstone projects online. So watch for the rollout this year. But we are looking for other partners. So if you want to start doing digital publishing, online publishing, come talk to us, and let's see if we can partner with you to make that happen. Finally, some website changes. Our focus group feedbacks from our students said, streamline it. There's too much on the page, we're getting lost. So you'll see a rollout, Josh, later this week.
Monday.
Okay, that's going to streamline the website a little bit, take some of the content off the front page, and make it easier to find where you're going. They also told us to drop the Twitter feed. We don't use Twitter. Okay. And to add a Facebook page, so that will be coming online as well. We're also going to do more advertising on the website. So you'll see the ability to find the new books that we have ordered and have got into the collection, both print and electronic. And that's going to be right on the front page. You'll be able to find those new resources that we're providing. That's going to be on the front page. We're also providing a link on the front page to, not on the front page, but on the website to request the purchase of something. Faculty can do that within the portal. Students cannot easily do that within the portal. They have to go looking for it. So we're putting a link on the front page, and they can request as quickly and easily as you can. And then finally, in media services, we offer the ability to check out things like cameras, laptops, video data projectors, all those sorts of things. And we've added the iPad 3 to that. So if you want to check out an iPad, we have those available. I can tell you there's going to be a lot of competition for that. So if you want it, better go get it. So, questions? Good.
Pretty good. All right, it was Ed's suggestion a year ago that instead of having scholarly activity presentations one after the other, that we have a poster session. And so that's what we did last year. It seemed to be quite popular, so that's what we're doing again. So I dismiss you to the back hallway of this building where we'll have tables and presentations on either side. And let's be back here about 3:30. Tim will lead us through a discussion of recruitment.